Okay, welcome to the future of project management. I'm here in Mumbai, India with Naresh Jain, and Naresh has a very interesting background. We'll talk to him today and find out how he went from teaching C and C++ back when he started to getting the highest award from the Agile Alliance and now leading two startups in Mumbai. So thanks Naresh for doing it.
Oh, thank you for coming all the way here.
Great.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, it is my hometown too, so great to be here. You want to start with telling us, what are you engaged in currently, and then maybe we can go back to where you started and briefly take us through, maybe to the point where you got the Agile Award.
All right. So currently I'm doing two startups. One of them is with a couple of people where what we're trying to do is we've looked at how kids learn arithmetics these days, maths in general, and traditionally in India, China, Asia predominantly, you will see that there was a very heavy focus on the ability to do mental arithmetic. And over the years, we've kind of gradually moved away from mental arithmetic to be more using calculators and things like that. And I mean that has many implications to it. So one of the startups we are trying to do is basically help kids learn mental arithmetic using abacus and Vedic maths. And I think over the last 3 years, the tablets have really penetrated the market, and so that's kind of what we are looking at as an opportunity in terms of the ability for kids to actually touch the beads, move the beads, the ability to actually do things over this, and then gradually transition to having those patterns registered in their mind and basically doing that. And there's also, I mean, before this, I was with Industrial Logic where we were building e-learning software more targeted at Agile professionals. Started with using it for Google employees and then gradually grew out. And there I've learned a great deal about how in terms of the form factor is very different when you're going e-learning. It's not about digitizing the class. What other people do is digitize the class. There's actually a lot more that you can do with online education today. And so that's, the starting off with mental arithmetic, but the scope is actually enormous to kind of grow into a platform that can do various number of things. So that's one of the startups that I've been involved with. The second startup kind of just happened to be when I was trying to organize the last Agile conference. I've been doing conferences over the last 7 years, and every time we do a conference, it's you have to go to a bunch of different places to kind of figure out, okay, here I'm going to get proposals from people, here I'm going to do the review system, here I'm going to prepare the schedule, then I need another system where people can register online, then I need another system to contact people. So it's just been very painful, and when we were doing the last conference, which was fairly large scale, we didn't really have the kind of time and patience to do all of that. So we said, this is a great market opportunity. We looked around, there were two predominant players. One of them is a Y Combinator backed company. And we said, wow, I mean, this space is, there is really a need, but it's fairly open in some sense. So actually for the conference we did a quick prototype and we kind of tested out certain aspects that we thought were critical. In fact, just today, this morning, I got a potential customer who is interested in the product for their conference. We are looking at moving more out of the software to so in India there is a huge scope for medical conferences. There are other kinds of conferences. So I think this product can be very useful for them. It's called BetterConf. And it's me and another guy, Sandeep Shetty, we are working on this.
Great. So your target for this conference application is really the organizers?
The conference
organizers. The organizers, for them to coordinate all this activity.
Correct. But then one of the personas would obviously be the participants, because they will let you know which sections they're interested in attending. That helps you forecast, allocate rooms, logistics, all of that can be tied back in, and then they can share which sections they're attending, and they can give feedback on sections. Sky's the limit, I mean,
I know.
what you can do. So we need to figure out where we're going to draw the boundaries, but again, we are really in the customer understanding the customer's space at this point.
So is this ready, release, or still beta?
Those concepts I think have gone long back.
Okay.
So we prototyped the product. It was used for the last conference.
Okay.
Parts of it was used. We only touched some areas of it.
Yeah.
So backend, like for example, the whole backend is still Google Docs.
Okay.
The whole thing is backing it as Google Docs, so
Okay.
we could actually play around with how we want to structure the data and things like that. But the front end portion, some parts of it were built out. People used it. We got feedback from people. So I think it's coming along pretty well.
And on this mental arithmetic, Vedic math. So what is it? A product? Is it an application? I mean, what is the business model there?
So it's a product. It's a product that you could buy either. So that's something that we're still trying to finalize. Is we don't think we want to go with Apple's iStore because they take a pretty significant cut on it.
Yeah.
And that's one part, but then also you have to build different code bases for different platforms.
Right.
Even though 70% of the market is really iPads, which is where we are going after, but there is still a good 20 to 30% penetration of other tablets.
Right.
So if we went with this, we were kind of locking ourselves from two perspectives. One is to the platform. Second is that if we do potential tie-ups with universities or other organizations who have a huge user base, then obviously we're locking ourselves out of it because they're going to ask us, what is special with this. So we're trying to keep our options open, so kind of going down the HTML file route for now and really thinking of it as a application in terms of the service that we provide.
Right.
Growing further into one-on-one education, one-on-one tutoring, remote tutoring, and things like that. But again, it's too early to know. We believe that the product we are building should be sufficient that you wouldn't actually need the one-on-one coaching.
Oh, okay.
But if you don't have data to back it, so we're saying that might be a possibility that would be required.
Well, yeah, both of them sound pretty good. Yeah. I was looking at all the things that you've been doing, and you started so many of these communities. This Agile FAQs, Agile Coach, ASCI, Simple Design Testing Conference, Agile Philly. Which was the first one did you start?
Actually, I was kind of involved with the Bangalore Linux community.
Okay.
And that's how I was not organizing or anything, I was just attending and participating in it.
Okay.
That's where I kind of got the initial feel for, meeting people, kind of hanging around with it, and then I did a presentation at one of the early Bangalore conferences.
Okay.
And I got pretty good feedback from people. So, that was one experience that I had, and then when I was with ThoughtWorks, we were trying to organize the first Agile conference in India. We were thinking, that was back in 2003, 2004. We were trying to do a 1 day or a 2 day XP day kind of a conference.
Okay.
And what ended up happening is we went around different places, we looked at universities, and lots of things happened, then the momentum picked up.
Okay.
When we were trying to do this, particularly few people asked, there is no community, who are you organizing the conference for? And we said, if there is no community, this conference could create a community. So we actually went with a quite inverse model. If you see predominantly what people do is there's already a community of people, and then they kind of bring them together and do a conference. In our case, there was no single user group meeting that had happened before that. We actually did straight the conference, and then followed with that was actually the Bangalore. So to do the conference, we realized we need a non-profit body to collect funds and manage all of that. That's when one fine evening 15 of us, whoever were in the room, basically signed, and we formed the Agile Software Community of India.
The Agile Software Community. Okay.
And that's kind of how this thing started, and then we went along, we did more conferences in different parts of India. Then I moved to US, which is where I was part of the Agile Philly group. I kind of ran that for a few years, came back and did other events.
So what year did you start this
Actually, I think it was 2004,
2004?
Maybe early 2005 time frame. I think it was February 2005 is when we incorporated Agile Software Community of India. From December, the planning had started.
And then how do you go about, when you form the community of when, for example, it doesn't exist, how did you go about finding members or generating interest? So how did you go about doing that?
So again, I was saying earlier is that that we didn't have an existing community. The people in our company where I used to work, ThoughtWorks, were practicing Agile, and so we knew there was that group of people, but certainly there had to be other people, or if they were not, we wanted to spread that awareness. Along the way, we created the conference, we started doing word of mouth publicity, and we came across Subex System, which was another company which was actually practicing machine programming back then. It was a product company, and Subex System, actually KD, who was the CTO of Subex System, came along, and he said he wants to sponsor the conference and he will give X amount of money, and even if there was no return on investment, basically it is a donation kind of a thing.
Right.
So when his company came along, a lot of other people started coming along, and we created a group on Yahoo Groups, and then that brought in quite a bit of interest. The very first conference we did, I think we had about 330 people at the conference, which was fairly big for the first conference. We were always thinking, 70 people, what if we don't get 70 people? We were looking at, how much we will have to pitch in from each of us. It was predominantly Manoj Bharadwaj, Owen Rogers, and myself. The three kind of the founders for this we were trying to do. So we were actually thinking one day how much each of us would have to pitch in. But then, clearly the conference grew over and beyond what we had expected.
You needed that software that time. 300 is a big number. That's true. And so, you mentioned you were in the US and then you came back. So what will you come back?
So it's a funny story. I went to the US, the company where I used to work. They basically said there's a critical project we need to help. So why don't you go there for 2 weeks? So I took my backpack. I thought I'll do 2 weeks of work and then I'll go hike in the Appalachian for a while. Ended up that I only came back after 5 months to get my wife back. And I stayed there for 2 years. So the plan was never to go there and settle down. In the first place, it was really to kind of go help with this one particular product and come back. But the more I stayed there, it was pretty clear to me that there is, I had been running the Agile Software Community of India. When I went there, I would still be doing remotely conferences in India. So I pretty much saw that there was a space that, there was some leadership that was required. So that was one of the things that made me come back, and we were obviously family, everybody's here, so we thought we'll come back.
How big is the community now, like in terms of number of members?
A while ago, what has happened with the Agile Software Community of India is we've been trying to find somebody else kind of take over. So it's been, since 2005, I've pretty much been running with it. And 2 years ago, I think we said that we want to bring somebody else on board. So we did try a few attempts, we were not successful with that. We then said maybe we want to form a committee of people who could run with this rather than one individual. And we've had issues with that, so that neither took off. And what happened since then, we've actually stopped taking any more members on board and things like that. The whole reason behind forming the committee was just to have a legal body through which we could do some events. It was never about kind of creating, unlike PMI or other organizations who are more focused around having the number of members, our focus was never there. So I actually frankly don't know, but I'm pretty sure we have 300, 400 plus members for sure. That I'm talking about corporate members.
Corporate members, right. Now, you worked in India, you worked a little while in the US, and now that you do the consulting and the training for the companies here, I want to touch upon the outsourcing scene and how prevalent is Agile in that scenario. Do people use it? Do the projects and offshore, onshore? Because most of the projects I have looked at from the onshore, offshore model. It's hard. First of all, they are away. It's hard to implement, but now with all the tools, What are you seeing? Is there adoption there, or is there still struggling?
So what happened maybe 6 years ago, we had this wave of CMM come in, right, into India. Maybe more, actually more than 6 years, maybe 10 years ago, we had this wave of CMM come in, and everybody kind of jumped upon the CMM bandwagon. Predominantly as a marketing strategy for the companies. Unfortunately, I see in a large sense Agile being the next CMM. So a lot of companies here, especially the outsourcing service vendors, are basically projecting themselves as we can do Agile projects, we can do CMM projects, we can do this. So that's one thing that I'm seeing in a lot of companies. Even though, I mean, I might be putting it in the bad light, I think that it does have some good implications associated with it. There's always a bright side to things. The other thing that I predominantly see happening is a lot of customers who are based either in Europe or in the US or Australia are actually pushing their counterparts over here to start being more agile. They're trying to push them into more. So a lot of places that I go in to help are predominantly because somebody over there
is pushing,
pulls me in saying, you know, we need help over here, why don't you go in and kind of you know, help us. So they've been trying to push from that side. Few product companies that I've worked for here, they don't have customers, they don't have those concerns. And they're looking at Agile as a way of you know, bringing in more discipline into the company, maybe you know, upping their skills to some extent. So I'm seeing you know, a quite diverse mix of driving factors, but the haystack, as you know, in India is very huge. So a lot of companies, it's more around customers pushing or them using it more as a marketing strategy. But you know, pretty much name a company and they're agile, right? It's fashionable to be agile.
And what sort of tools are they using for collaboration or daily scrums, or I mean, are there any specific tools?
Most people do video conferences or voice conferences, and I think they struggle big time. My advice is generally not to do distributed daily stand-ups with the whole team. It doesn't really work well. Not at least to start off, because first get the understanding of what's the fundamentals behind it before you kind of do that. A lot of companies are using Rally or version 1 or Mingle or one of these tools, or some of them are using other, you know, the next version, the slightly less expensive versions of the tools, and they're trying to balance, you know, they're trying to strike the balance between all the stuff they have to do from a CMM perspective and ISO perspective, and also so there is some amount of tooling and documentation that is required. You might be a department in a larger organization. The larger organization is a CMM level 5 company, driven hard with documentation and other kinds of things. And you know, if there's a small department in the company that's the client is pushing for you to be agile, they have to strike the balance between the two. So the tools to some extent are again driven from balancing the two perspectives.
That's a hard balance. That is a hard balance to come up with. Or you know, on your LinkedIn profile, in one of the descriptions, you say that you strive to keep up with technology and process. And you know, we all know how quickly it changes and so many things come up. So can you give our audience a last sort of feel of how do you go about doing it? You know, what sort of blogs do you read? What do you do? Do you do it on a daily basis? I mean, what do you do?
I struggle. I struggle. So one of the unfortunate things with me is I cannot read. So if I take a book and I start reading maybe 3 lines into it, I find myself daydreaming about you know, how this could have been. So I'm pretty bad at reading stuff, and I started blogging, thinking that at least that way I'll go read something before I write crap. But it's been 6-7 years. I don't know. I don't read much. I still keep writing a lot of crap. But along the way, I discovered the beauty about the conferences and user groups, and I think the user groups and conferences have been the source of you know, this thing, and that's been one of the driving factors for me to organize more conferences. Is to actually meet in person the speakers, the authors of books, and so forth. Because then, you know, when you read a book, it's a really one-way thing. But at a conference, you get to, you know, have two-way discussions, sit down, talk with them, pair program with them, invite them to your product or
Yeah.
project, go visit their projects. So
Correct.
we've been able to do a lot bit of networking because of the conferences, and I think that's been one great way of learning for me. I do have a small circle of people that I generally hang around with,
Okay.
and those people are kind of they don't have the problem about reading and stuff like that. So they become my filters in terms of what is most important to
Correct.
be reading, what is happening new. Like recently, about not 6 months, maybe less than that, 3 months ago or so. One of them was talking about how Pinterest is coming up, and that's quite interesting. I mean, I wouldn't not discover it, but through this network, I'm able to find things. We have a few private mailing lists on which we share things. So that's kind of been one of the models through which I've been kind of learning.
That's a unique. I haven't heard of anyone else sort of follow that model. A lot of other people I talk to are, I read this 10 blogs on a daily basis. I read a lot of stuff. They have stacks and stacks of books, and so it's a more offline sort of model. You got a big screen, and that's good. But no, that is an interesting way to actually look at it.
In fact, one of the rationale behind the Simple Design and Testing conference was to do an all open space conference where everybody is actually a speaker. And you have a position paper that you need to put in before you can attend the conference. The conference itself is free, but you have to put in a position paper to come in. And what happens is the position paper acts as a really good filter to get people who are really interested in sharing knowledge. And a few years ago, somebody attended the conference, and at the end of the conference, we do a closing of the open space. So one of the persons said that this conference was like Google without the browser. Pretty much you ask anything, and people are there to help you, and there's so much of knowledge sharing. Each year, I attend the conference, I come back with at least 8 or 10 things I want to try and see, and go back the next year to share that. Like one year we talked about even if, what would be if we eliminated all if statements from it. And it's, it was interesting to try that out, and that's been one of the fantastic learning opportunities.
Yeah, I bet it must be. One of the main reasons I requested you for the interview is because I saw sort of where you progressed and how you came from teaching C++ to all these various backgrounds to now being involved in 2 startup companies in Mumbai. A lot of my audience probably have a similar background, not now that what you're doing, but similar to what you were doing probably at the beginning or the middle of your career, either in testing or project management or those kind of things. Any advice for them in terms of as they build their careers? What advice would you give them? You've done a lot of variety of things.
I think that's one important thing that I would suggest people is they should try different varieties and find where they are not just most passionate, but also where they're most effective, because while something I'm really passionate about, I might not be the most effective person in that. So one needs to find a groove in terms of passion and where they're most effective. One needs to try enough and keep trying, because that puts them into the shoes of like the problem with a lot of coaches is we've kind of got to the stage where a lot of things have become muscle memory for us. We don't really relate to people when they're learning new. And if you yourself are kind of simultaneously learning new things, you kind of sympathize, you kind of connect with people a lot better. So I think that is an important advice I would give, and that's something that's been really helpful for me, is always have this beginner's mind to try to learn new things, to try and involve in new things. And you never know where you find something that interests you. The problem with me though is that I get bored with things very quickly. So having the variety is good, and having the exposure is good from an overall understanding point of view, and finding where you're most effective. One other thing I generally tell people is that it's not just the destination, it's the journey too, right? So enjoy what you're doing. It's not just about someday I'm going to be in this position, because maybe that someday will never come if you're not enjoying what you're doing today. So I think whatever I involve, I ask myself if this is something that I'm enjoying. Is this something I'm really having fun with? I'm learning. I'm growing. Then naturally it kind of takes you into a trip. But if you are always looking for, oh, I'm going to do this just so I can get there, I don't think that works really well.
It's just not that effective, and the product that you create, whatever output you create, is just not that good.
One thing that I see is when you are really passionate about something and you want to change, you want to bring in some change, people respect the passion you bring and they can connect with that. If you're just in there for X, Y, and Z reason, using this as a means, not an end in itself, then that becomes fairly transparent. That becomes fairly visible to people, and they can see that. So I think that's why I think it's very important for people to enjoy the journey as well.
And people can feel it. People know it when they see it. Is this guy just marketing? He's just faking it, and is it really genuine? And
but in the social world we have today, there's only so much you can fake and move.
I know.
The last piece of advice I would have, and that's something that I talk a lot about, is it's better to burn out than to fade away. I see a lot of people talk about sustainable pace and talk about 40 hours a week and things like that, and we are not machines. We cannot be clocked 40 hours. There are days when I can work 16 hours and be extremely productive and I feel good about it. There are days when in 2 hours I want to call it a day because I don't feel productive. So, we can't put these artificial boundaries around us, and there is a time and place when you can clock in a lot more hours, and that's the time you need to utilize, because that time when it's gone, it won't come back. Right? And the more earlier on in your career you put in time to explore, learn, to grow, that's going to be a strong foundation that's going to last very long, in my opinion. Today I can go in and talk about testing because I have first-hand experience. I can do something else because I have first-hand experience. I'm not trying to wing it. And I would have not got that depth of experience unless there have been projects when I have not gone home for a week. And, it's just been working on it because I'm enjoying the journey. Second, I'm learning, and I think overall today I look back, I think it has been extremely important for me to put in those hours. Sometimes mundane work, sometimes very interesting work.
I know.
But it all kind of really helps you to understand in the end.
That is true. That means sustainability and sustained velocity, and it's hard. People don't work that way. I mean, humans don't work that way.
It's sustainable when you're enjoying and you're learning. The hours don't really matter.
It doesn't matter.
If you're not enjoying, then it's not sustainable. Find something else.
So, talking of enjoying, when you do have downtime from your conference and from your consulting and from all the other things that you do, what are the things that you like to do? Hobbies, interest?
It's been a while since I've done anything. I used to run an adventure sports company, so I used to take people out for hikes and rafting and stuff like that. That was something I was really passionate, and whenever I could find downtime, even now and then when I find some downtime, I kind of look for some kind of an adventure trip.
Adventure trip, okay. Like, what is adventure trip have you been on?
Recently did the Rishikesh whitewater rafting.
Oh, water rafting.
Water rafting. Done the bungee jump from. I mean, it's not the ultimate adventure, but it's fun. It's the adrenaline rush, so it's pretty cool.
Great. No, thank you so much for your time, Naresh, and it's been wonderful talking to you. Here in Bombay, we are looking over Goregaon and beautiful suburb, beautiful house, Naresh's house. I'm sure you guys learned a lot from him, and if the audience wants to connect with you, is there any way, what is the best way to connect?
Sure, I mean, they can Google for Naresh Jain,
Okay.
they can get the details, they can drop me an email, I'm happy to respond.